Okay. Right, so as always, it's a bit chilly out there, as somebody said. So do take care. Should always take things like that into account when you start to exercise. Make sure that you're not kind of sitting there shivering or anything like that. Just rubbing your hands together. And then tapping lightly over your face. And then over your head and neck. Into one shoulder. Arm. Side. Part of your chest. Belly. And your legs. Just sit back. Feel your weight dropping back into the chair. The sense of your thoughts settling into your body. Tai Chi works best when we can bring in the whole package, as it were, not just a physical exercise, not just a sort of process of calming and relaxation, not just a sort of meditative thing of awareness, but when those different elements that we know about come together into one whole. My first teacher, Bronwyn Hipkin, used to talk about the three aspects of Tai Chi itself, you know, the forms and things, where there was she used to talk about the three M's. There was meditation, and there was medical and health stuff, and then there was the martial side of it. And I tend to think of those three elements as sort of mind, body, and I suppose function. You could say it's been like the three legs of a tripod. If you take away any one of those three legs, then the whole tripod is weakened. That doesn't mean that we have to sort of like train every aspect of it. I used the term functional rather than martial a few moments ago. Tai Chi is a very practical art. I think that martial element gives it a very practical side. But I think that practical side can be applied in lots of different circumstances. So we want to be able to just settle our thoughts into our body, to become aware of what's happening within the body, both in the interest of quieting our attention, focusing our attention, but also so that we know what we're working with. We have this sense of how we're feeling, what's happening within that inner landscape of the body. You can just place your hand on your belly, just feel the movement underneath your hands as you breathe in and out, and the expansion in your belly, drawing the breath down into your lungs. You may feel a bit of movement in your sides and your back with this as well. Change position again, come back to the upright position, find a place on the chair that's comfortable for you. I'm quite a long way forwards, but remember, you know, you might want to sit further back. have some support for your back, or more support for your back. But even sitting forwards like this, really, when we were sitting back, I got you to try that breathing, because there your back's obviously supported by the chair. Here, it's more tricky because the support for the back actually isn't behind your back as you might anticipate, but actually comes from below. It comes from this solid foundation of feet and hips and the chair, and this feeling of your weight beginning to drop down. So any kind of movement in your body, particularly your upper body, this has an impact. You can begin to feel things changing within your body. Now, just starting with your head, slowly turning your head. One way we can get a better sense for that internal movement, that the way our body performs the movement, is just to lightly touch, say, the back of your neck here on one side, and as you turn your head, just feel any changes that are apparent beneath your fingertips, if any, and then maybe the shoulder as well. And then hands down to your sides and arms out, straight out from your hips and rotating. Turn your hands palm forwards and then just circling around as far as you're comfortable. And again, we can begin to just notice extra movements. So for instance, what you could do, one hand, just place in front of the opposite shoulder where your arm meets your chest. There's a little kind of valley there. And when you turn your arm, see if you can just feel any change there. Don't worry if you can't. And then winding around as though you're winding up string. Again, that same movement is there. Maybe you can feel, you might be able to feel it on one side and not the other. All sorts of variations. Go back the other way. Rest your hands. Tilting forward, your pelvis rocks, and put your hands on your legs. Can you feel any change in the muscles of your thighs as you move forwards and backwards? Remember, we want the muscles of the legs and the whole of the leg, not just the muscles, to absorb the extra weight and to allow that extra weight to keep moving down into your feet. Another place that you might be able to reach, place your hand on the lower part of your back, just where your spine meets your pelvis here. And as you go forward, feel any movement there or behind the hips. Just using that sense of touch to open out your awareness of movement within your body. These are the movements that build into the bigger movements. And of course, they take place on multiple levels. The level that we can feel is really quite a big movement because we can feel it. But we can gradually begin to sense other movements within the body. Turning just a little bit. feel the difference between one side of your body and another now as you do this. We're training our bodies to listen, training our minds rather to listen to our body. Be aware of small changes. And eventually to use that awareness to somehow bind those changes together, to connect those changes more efficiently. Turn the other way. And then going around. Change direction. Come back to the center and push one heel up and extend your foot out and pull back. The whole leg expands out from your hip, whole foot goes down on the ground, and then your leg contracts back. Good, and then on the other side. And bring your feet down. So this increasingly detailed picture of the inner landscape of the body and increasingly the space around us draws our attention in. When we talk about meditation, training the mind, it's very easy to feel that this is somehow beyond you. But everybody experiences the same thing, as far as I can tell from what people have said and what people have written. Our thoughts naturally drift away. We get caught up in daydreams and storylines, but at the same time, we're also aware of what's around us. If you hear a noise outside, it's quite natural to wonder what that noise is, to maybe just sort of think, oh, is that somebody knocking at the door, or that kind of thing. We need to do that. What we don't want to do is to get distracted by things like that, unless it's something important. Then obviously maybe we need to answer the door, but mostly, it's a car going past or neighbors talking or whatever, and our attention gets drawn away. But we want to bring our attention back, whether it's a profound thought or whether it's a car revving up outside your window. Really, the main aim during the practice sessions are to just maintain that sort of internal feel. One image that I came across for this from a seated meditation teacher was that when we meditate, if you want to use the term, it's as though we're sitting beside a river, just watching the river flow past us. We're not trying to manipulate the river. We're not trying to block the flow of the river. We're not even necessarily wondering about where it's come from or where it's going. We're just focusing on the sensation, the reflection, just watching the water. So he said that, one really important aspect, and really the foundation aspect of all meditation, would be to just sit on the riverbank, to just be there. And what happens is we get distracted, we fall in the river, and then we notice that we're off on some kind of track of thought, and all we do is we come back to the riverbank. We just climb out and we sit beside the river again. So in that sense, everything that we do could be seen as constructing our own little riverbank. It's never going to be the whole story in Tai Chi any more than it is in other meditative traditions, but it is the part of the sort of heart, part of the foundation of practice. So bird folds its wings, hands turning forwards, again hanging from your shoulders, rolling your weight forwards, tilting the pelvis forwards, and then feeling your hips pull you back into the chair. A little push from your legs as well. The movements themselves guide our thoughts in this process. So the rhythm of the movements is that we naturally extend out here. You may feel your back just lengthening slightly, but always drawn back. Extension, contraction, lengthening, shortening, expansion, so on. So all these are different terms that we use. And they're generally paired. There's not just one, there's two. The generic term for these will be yin yang. We're looking for an appropriate balance between them. And between the two poles, between the opposites, this lovely flow of movement begins to build. And now we're going to change to fisherman castanet. The arms are hanging down, and the momentum of the movement, along with little changes in chest and upper back, mean that the arms begin to swing a little bit further. So once again, there's an extension outwards, a little lengthening through back and arms, and then a drawing back. So if we learn to follow the movements through each stage, we realize that actually what's happened is that rhythm of the movement has helped to bring your attention back to this central position. Extending out, so feel the movement right into your fingertips, and then withdrawing, feeling your back contracting, bringing your attention back down into your hips and your center, and then moving out again and back. This time going forwards, the extension a little bit stronger, coming back, but again, inevitably the movement bringing your attention back. So this isn't an either or proposition, either we're still or either we're moving. Tai Chi, in the end, shouldn't recognize any difference between these. The stillness within the movement, this movement around the stillness, they're mutually dependent. This time change into the pigeon spreads its wings. Again, expanding, contracting, expanding, contracting. Now changing to pushing away. Those changes between extension and contraction are often the same points that we change from one movement to another. We don't want to rush them. We don't want to hurry. If anything, we want to just take a moment, and it is only a moment. If we really emphasize it, it takes a few seconds perhaps, but we do that in the interest of actually helping us to take just a moment. From one stage to the next. Good, and then fist in your hands. So while this may sound a bit esoteric, that ability to just settle onto the riverbank or however you think about it, draw your attention back, is actually quite important. We're faced with these changes in our lives, almost from moment to moment. And maybe not all of them, but some of them deserve just a little bit of consideration. And we need to be aware of them in order to give them that consideration. And we do this quite naturally. You walk down the road and there's a couple of shops, and you're thinking, well, which one shall I go to? Generally speaking, we stop and we think, where shall I go? So this quality of stopping for a moment to enable us to just, I suppose, in a way, assess the situation isn't restricted to Tai Chi, but by focusing on it, we start to actually bring it more into our lives. Turning your hands palm out. These moments of stillness, whatever you call them, are also really important breaks. They stop us rushing from one thing to another. And gradually, it doesn't become, oh yes, I've been busy, now I've got to take a break. But that quality of stillness will sometimes just gently underpin everything else that you do. The way that you do, even sometimes quite difficult tasks, can begin to change. Less stressed, calmer, more fluid in your actions and your movements. And then change into polishing the table. Do one more in each direction. Good. Now, let your hands drop down, and then with a push downwards to the feet and hips, the gentle lengthening of your spine, your arms following that movement up, reversing all of that so you feel your hands being pulled down, expanding and contracting. Again, don't rush any particular stage of the movement. Keep a nice steady pace and rhythm. And then the same idea, going out, hands going out to the side, like the bird in flight. And straining your arms so that raise them up too high or push them right out. Keeping that softer quality that helps to maintain that in the space within your body. Within that space, that's where we get those small movements, that energy building up. Knees forwards, hands crossing in front of your knees. Sit back, and again, a little push up, heart in the clouds. Where as your hands push up and down, the feeling of contact with the ground beneath your feet, feeling contact with the chair beneath your hips, both of which will help to balance out that sort of movement. That awareness is arguably the still point, I suppose you could say. And this time, dragon plucks the stars from the sky. One more time. And then both hands together. Pressing up. And pushing out. And then this time as you push out, rest one heel forwards, knees still slightly bent, scooping the sea and looking at the sky. Don't strain in your back, but just feel your hips dropping back into the chair. And it's almost like you're just kind of flopping backwards. Not quite the right description, but it may be a good starting point because quite often we don't, we find ourselves straining. Sink back into the chair. And again, this is where that moment of, let's call it stillness, can be really valuable because it's quite a tricky exercise. You go down, you think, well, how am I going to get up without straining in my back? And you just let yourself settle, and then maybe you're aware of what's happening in your hips. Quite often, we know more than we think we know with these arms. Then change into grasping the tiger's ears. One more time. Then we're going to change over. Scooping the sea, looking at the sky. And grasping the tiger's ears. Okay. Feet back in. Moving around, again in this circular fashion, and then reverse the movement, just like you're doing polishing the table. But instead of making it this really big movement here, just make it a slightly smaller movement. Just feel the movement in the center of your body. You maybe see my hand moving a little bit. So this is the movement that we're going to build into the exercise we call polishing the table. With your right hand, you turn to your right and then to your left and back, always back. And then turn to your left, now it's the left hand to extend out and draw back. And eventually these two movements begin to overlap. You can perhaps see how my body's turning here. Polishing the table, it's called. And then come back to just sitting. So as we get into more complex exercises, next we're going to do part of the wild horse's mane, those little moments of being able to just sit back become very important. So we gradually train ourselves so that our first response to any kind of complication, whether it's something in Tai Chi, whether it's a letter from the bank manager or I don't know, whatever, all these things that come into our lives in all sorts of ways, then actually we want to be able to manage that. We want to be able to work creatively with those things. And I think that stillness that comes in Tai Chi is really helpful for that. So part of the Wild Horse's Mane, going through the basic stepping pattern, start with your weight back in your right hip, forwards into your left leg, back into the right hip and across. And then on the other side, going into your right leg, back towards your left hip. So it's a slight turn in your body as you do this. This time, holding your hands in front of you. Turn your left hand palm down. And as you move forward, it's as though you're pulling the right hand away from the left. And then just you let it come back and you hold the ball. And then you move across to the other side. And just bring it out. Easy and gently, parting the Wild Horse's Mane. Hands separate and draw back together. And separate and draw back. One more time. And then just let your hands rest on them. Take a couple of slow, gentle breaths. So your weight once again sinking through your hips. Let your hands drop to your sides. Go back into the movement of Wild Goose and see if you can just feel again that sense of compression and release, particularly here in the sides of your body. It's always in your legs and your hips. So this movement builds to the opposite movement. This time, as you push up and out, turn your body, so turn to your left, move your weight a little bit into your right foot, and then back. Same thing in the opposite direction. This time, give this movement a helping hand with a little bit of a push from the foot. And then again from the opposite foot. But really, you don't want to make that a big movement. It does happen. Your weight will move across and the other leg does push you a bit, but you should barely be able to see it. And then just raise in the opposite foot. And now we go from what we might call wind blows the willows into dragonfly skims the water. Now, I don't want to get here and do this. I keep the body upright, so I look for that sinking down. And then it's easier for me to maintain an upright position whilst I lift the foot. One more thing you can add to this, if you wish, is you raise the foot and then just rotate the leg. So now it's like you're kicking a ball up with the side of your foot. Just going, that's quite a strong movement. If it doesn't feel right for you, then leave it. One more time. Rest. Now, rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. And over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. Your arm. The side. And the upper part of your chest. Belly. And push down through the ball of one foot so your knee comes up and down, just working the muscles of your legs here. And then rotate. And on the other side. And rotate. Okay, and then standing. So first of all, think about the standing. Give yourself a few moments in the posture that we want. And a really good way of ensuring that you get both a decent posture and continue that quiet quality in your mind, of course, is to pay attention to your posture. Think about it. Feet are hip width apart. It's very easy to stand in, and I've done this, and I've seen people do it. You stand in a class, and the teacher says, do this, and you think, yeah, okay, but you don't actually do anything. There's a disconnect between body and mind. So just make sure, have a look down. Do you have the width that allows for that dropping of your center of gravity? Where are your toes pointing? We know that in the standing, we want a little bit of our weight forwards, and we just have that very gentle dropping back. And again, place one hand here on your lower back, and as you drop back, feel what's happening in that area where your spine meets the pelvis. Can you feel a sort of slight change as the hips drop back? Maybe in the sides as well. And just this sense of sitting. And again, we're just trying to build up this picture of the body. Now, sinking down, bringing your hands around. We'll do this as a little set of 3. So we extend out and we contract. And then we change to the wild goose and we extend out and we contract. And then we let the hands drop down and we go into parting the clouds, expanding and contracting. And then we let the hands come under and we start the sequence again. It's very easy when we're doing even a simple sequence like this to lose where you are in that sequence. But again, this is where that just settling down helps. We don't have to rush from one to another. There's that sense of pausing. It's not really a stopping in the movement. It's much more to do with the mind. We come back to the riverbank to call on the image that I used at the start of the class. Just do one more round. Okay. Give your legs a shake. Now, keeping the hip width, go into the forward stance, the bow stance. Begin to transfer your weight and be aware that actually we could regard each movement forwards or backwards as an extension, particularly because the leg that we're moving from extends out. And yet at the same time, the leg that we're moving into is compressed, it's a contraction there. So what we want to do is just settle there for a moment. It can be useful to focus on that. Sometimes I get people to rest on one leg, to take a breath in, to take a breath out. But of course, in practical terms, it's not going to take that long. It just introduces the idea. Once the idea is there, once again, we start to feel that the stillness and the movement are very much present together. But still, it's always useful sometimes to take just that little bit of time out, just enough in this instance, this exercise, to feel that there is that compression and that the leg is going to quite naturally expand. We don't have to think, all right, should I go forwards now? We sink down. It's like sinking down in water. The water will push you back up, but instead of going up, we move forwards or backwards. And of course, it's in that moment when we actually begin to move the empty leg. We raise our toes or our heel. In the first stage, moving towards taking this short step. We begin to realize that that element of stillness is a key factor in our ability to do this. And then stepping in. Once again, settle down, and then your foot contracts in, your leg contracts in, and expands out. Good. And then on the other side, transferring your weight. Raising your toes and your heel. and then stepping in. And step through. So just go in whichever direction suits you first. But just be aware that there is always that little sense of stopping. There's a temptation to hurry. Try and just come back to the riverbank, as it were. Change direction when you need to. Good. Have your right foot forwards. Fisherman cast the net. So when we do this, as you arrive in your front foot, you sink down, you feel your hips dropping back. That's actually when the arms extend out. Once again, what I've referred to as stillness or coming back to the riverbank is not a separate thing from movement, but rather very much an integral part of that. And then sit back, and this time, as you settle in, return. We're going into Wind Blows the Willows. Okay, and then change over. And fisherman cast a net, settling down, allowing the arms to swing out. So remember, this is not an either-or thing. As I said at the start, that all the different elements in Tai Chi reinforce each other. The awareness that comes with the stillness reinforces the movement. The movement helps to focus and develop our awareness. Working with the posture helps to just focus our attention. And helps to produce the fluidity of the movement. And then Wind Blows the Willows. And finally, we can begin to approach something more complicated. With that combination, we have the potential to begin to be able to unravel things. You could call this the sort of tools for problem solving. You can sometimes see more of the big picture. Good, and then bring your feet back. Shake hands. Lovely, go back to your chair. Once again, just aware of your posture, however you're sitting, whether you're forwards or backwards in the chair, trying to get a sense for a certain amount of your weight in your feet and your legs. Feeling that you're sort of held in between. In fact, you could think of it like this. There's a movement downwards, pulling you forwards. There's a movement behind you, pulling you back. And we find that still point in between the two, like a kestrel hanging on the wind or a kite hanging on the wind. So the movement itself can lead to the stillness when we can find a balance between movement, a point between movements where they neutralize each other. That will also produce the stillness, not necessarily the other way around. Let your hands drop down, feel the weight of your arms hanging from your shoulders, and then embrace tiger, return to mountain. The emphasis here, of course, very much on that quietening, stilling process at the end of the session. This can be a good way of actually allowing whatever you picked up to just be genuinely absorbed into your body. Sometimes we can be too busy to generally take something in. We notice this sometimes if somebody's talking to us and our mind is elsewhere, or we're busily thinking of something else, or maybe even busily thinking about what we're going to say next, and we suddenly realize that we haven't actually absorbed what they were saying. And then resting. And just open your eyes. Lovely. The interesting thing about being still, of course, is how quickly things move on when they do. That's why the sessions, I think, always seem to be very short. Thank you very much, everybody.